Welcome dear students. Today our topic of discussion is federalism in Pakistan, past, present and the future trends. The main objectives to this lecture are to understand the growth and development of Pakistan's federal structure, to critically examine how federal is Pakistan's system, and also to analyze the reason data behind demands of abrogating 18th Amendment Act. Dear students, before going to discuss in detail the growth of federalism in Pakistan, it is pertinent to briefly touch the concept of federalism Pakistan's ruling elite adopted. Federalism is adopted to organize and administer relationship between federating units and the center. It is a device to harmonize the sentiments of autonomy without affecting the unity of the state. Federalism is rooted in the Latin word foedes, which means covenant or treaty. To quote a renowned British jurist and constitutionalist A.V. Dicey, federalism means the distribution of the force of the state among a number of coordinate bodies, each originating in and controlled by the Constitution. Moreover, there are two modes of federalism. One, where the federating units federate voluntarily, as in the case of the United States, Switzerland and Australia, in yielding of some but not all powers to central government, overarching the constituents. The other one is diametric opposition to the above one. Instead of independent units coming together and ceding power to the federal government, the all-powerful center devolved powers on subordinate provincial units. The British adopted the later model in colonial India. Now coming to Pakistan, although Pakistan and India went through similar colonial experiences and also shared a pre-colonial cultural heritage, the two countries have had different kind of experiences with federalism. Pakistan emerging out of the colonial apparatus with Muslim League and other parties demanding federal structures fiddled with the presidential to parliamentary to martial laws and a hybrid like system, hence eventually tilting the balance of power in favor of the president with 8th and 17th amendments in the Constitution of 1973. The 18th Amendment is said to have arguably empowered the Parliament again. Pakistan has been federation since independence, partly as the constitutional legacy of British India and partly as the result of necessity from 1947 to 1971, when it comprised two non-contiguous territorial units. Historically, the provinces had developed distinct ethnic and linguistic identities of their own as sovereign states. In order to deal with ethnic pluralism, many constitutional arrangements were put in place. For example, Pakistan adopted the Government of India Act of 1935 with minor changes. It served as the first interim constitution. Right from the inception of Pakistan as an independent entity, the ethno-nationalists claim that Pakistan was created on the basis of 1935 British Indian Act and 1940 Lahore Resolution. Both of 1935 Act and Lahore Resolution talked about confederation as a new social contract between center and units. However, the ruling elite took recourse to the 1947 Independence of India Act, where authority of the state after partition devolved to the dominance in a top-down approach rather than in bottom-up fashion. The geographical location, where two wings separated by thousands of miles and India at center, pushed ruling elite towards centralization of all meaningful power in its own hands. The 1947 Act gave enormous powers to the center. Thus, Pakistan was born in an anomalous political situation that led to two contradictory approaches, making federalism the only option for a viable form of government and making it as toothless as possible. The ruling elites, who enjoyed economic, political and administrative power, shunned the grim prospects of rendering majority position to the East Wing. Due to imbalance or imparity of population between the two wings, the ruling elites pushed for the inter-wing parity in terms of equal representation in the parliament. Apart from the 1962 Constitution, 1956 and 1973 Constitutions talk about federalism. Federalism under 1956 Constitution. During the phase of 1947-56, when first constitution was framed, lot of energy went in the debate on the extent of power of the provinces and of federation. There was considerable geographic and demographic imbalance between two wings of the state. It was natural for East Pakistan's elites to favor a bicameral legislature which could guarantee their upper hand over western wing. West Pakistan, on the contrary, was in favor of parity between two wings, as supremacy of East Pakistan was totally unacceptable for the elite class of Punjab. Muhammad Ali Bogra formula tended to present solution of the problem by adopting principle of parity of both wings. One unit scheme of 1955 combined 4 provinces of West Pakistan into one unit. That was again a big issue. The constitution tried to soften the centralizing impact of the Government of India Act 1935. The federal list was shortened with 30 items, which were 61 earlier, and provincial list had 94 items, while the concurrent list was also reduced to 19 items. There are views that it was still enough to centralize the administrative and economic development system by the central government. The central government had overriding powers in the matters of economic development, national security and coordination amongst the provinces. Quantum of sovereignty was another issue related to the federal nature of the constitution. Eastern wing along with northwestern frontier province, present day Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Sindh, were in favor of greater self-government and wanted to restrict the center only with defense, foreign policy and economic affairs. This demand again was strongly opposed by the Punjab, that was in favor of a strong center with effective powers. Punjab in fact was in favor of such pattern of federalism that was set in the provisional constitution of 1947. Issue of national language was another obstacle between two wings, as the language of majority Bengali was demanded to be declared as the national language, while rest of the provinces were vulnerable regarding their own languages. Urdu could be a best solution, but eastern part was not ready to accept it. Lastly, consensus was acquired by declaring both Urdu and Bengali as the national languages. The Constitution of 1956 exerted to answer all issues raised by multiple challenges at the period of the time. This Constitution had derived lots of clauses from Provisional Constitution of 1947. This Constitution was promulgated on 23rd March 1956. As far as quantum of sovereignty was concerned, this Constitution sanctioned 30 subjects to the center and 94 subjects were granted to the federating units. A National Monetary Council and a Finance Commission were also set up. The duty of Monetary Council was to advise government on the formulation of fiscal policies, and responsibility of Finance Commission was to manage distributable taxes and sanctioning of loans. However, the Legislative Assembly was dissolved in 1958 ahead of anticipated national elections, and the reins of power later went in the hands of the military, with Commander-in-Chief Ayub Khan, who ruled the country under martial law between 1958-1962 without any constitutional apparatus. The dissolution of assembly created serious difficulties in relationships between the eastern and western parts of Pakistan and had long-term impact on the performance of its federal system. However, in 1962, a new constitution based on basic democracies while retaining the one unit was created. Federalism under 1962 Constitution. The powers were now concentrated in the hands of one man with no constitutional attitude. Ayub Khan was in fact a military bureaucrat, and he had no motive to introduce a parliamentary democracy. Rather, he worked to strengthen his one-man rule. The relation between federal government and the federating units is explicitly narrated in the preamble. This constitution again tilted in the favor of a strong center. Mainly, two lists are given to set the quantum of the power. First, central list with 49 items, and second, concurrent list. Office of President was equipped with immense powers and privilege, with creation of important unicameral legislature that had no power to check the high-handedness of the office of the President. Same pattern was followed in the provinces where governors were present to speak on the behalf of the President. They were nominated by the will of the President and equipped with enormous powers. The essence of federalism and its utility was rather crushed in a varied cultural, multilingual and demographically imbalanced state with politically non-compromising leadership. Federalism under 1973 Constitution. After breakdown of the country in 1971, provincial autonomy or more powers to provinces generated an anxiety. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto claimed that separation of East Pakistan from West was over autonomy. Federalism is a vital bond that keeps the territory together under one administration. In case of Pakistan, the issue and nature of federalism has created multiple hazards in the consolidation and survival of the state. When Ayub Khan stepped down and Yahya Khan took over as the chief martial law administrator, he introduced some ordinances that fell heavy on the unity and consolidation of the state. He broke the one unit scheme and restored the previous status of the West Pakistan. The West Pakistan Dissolution Order of 1970 made Balochistan as an independent province. It was a big decision that proved quite problematic after the elections, when both leading parties, that is Pakistan People's Party and Awami League, could not secure even one seat in each other's opposing wings. This vividly made clear the polarization of the underlying philosophy of leadership and of masses on both sides of border. The 6 points of Mujibur Rahman demanded a weak center, limited to the issue of defense, foreign policy and treasury, etc., while there was a forceful demand for strong units. The role of strong center was severely penalized by the East Pakistan leadership with the demand of separation from the West Pakistan. East Pakistan debacle was an inevitable result of the mismanagement of the issues of federating units by the center. Consequently, 1973 Constitution was the result of many compromises, as the wounds of East Pakistan were yet bleeding. This Constitution introduced bicameral legislature, which was a new thing, as prior to this unicameral legislature was introduced with the federation. Position of Prime Minister was strong and parliamentary system was adopted. The President was a titular who was the representative of the state. The Constitution issued two legislative lists, Federal list and the concurrent list. Bhutto, who took the reins of power after 1971 war, accepted the demand of the National Awami Party that governors should be appointed from the provincial majority party and designated National Awami Party members to fill those posts in the frontier and Balochistan. However, when Bhutto dismissed governors on February 15, 1973, he said in the letters of dismissal that a governor under the constitution holds office during president's pleasure and his agent in the province. The 1973 constitution contained a new power arrangement to redefine the principles of federalism under the term maximum provincial autonomy. The residuary powers were vested in the provincial assemblies. The one unit system abolished by Yahya Khan was followed by an ordinance which raised Balochistan to provincial status in 1970. For the first time, a bicameral legislature was elected. The Senate was elected for 4 years on a parity basis. The provinces were to elect 14 members, each for 4 years. Half of the members retired after 2 years. The 1973 constitution contained 2 lists, federal and concurrent. The federal list comprised 2 parts. Part 1 contained items over which only the parliament could legislate. The federal list contained 67 subjects. The federal and provincial governments could legislate over the concurrent list. However, in case of conflict over the exercise of power, the central government's right prevailed. The constitutional period of the Bhutto government was also marked by a strong role of the central government, resulting in discontent in 2 provinces, the northwestern frontier province and Balochistan. Even before the 1973 constitution could function, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, under the interim constitution of 1972, as the interim president, dissolved the Balochistan coalition government of Ataullah Mengal on February 15, 1973. He dismissed the National Awami Party governor of the province and installed Nawab Bugti. The prospects for federalism were further dimmed after the military under General Ziaul Haq seized power and suspended the constitution for another 8 years. The power set up from 1977 to 1985 was crudely in the hands of a military junta, which controlled the political structure in an almost unitary manner. A number of presidential orders, later on to be covered by the 8th Amendment in the 1973 Constitution, were proclaimed one after another to run the government. 17th Amendment to Constitution of 1973. On October 12, 1999, Pakistan again lapsed into a military regime. General Pervez Musharraf staged a military coup against the elected government of Nawaz Sharif. A legal framework order was issued to run the affairs of the state with a pledge to run the government according to the spirit of the Constitution of 1973. General Musharraf, in his speech on October 13, 1999, announced a 7-point agenda which included a clause about strengthening of the federation by removal of interprovincial disharmony and restoration of national cohesion. The 17th Amendment was passed in December 2003. This amendment again increased the powers of the president, who could now dissolve the legislative assembly. However, a clause was added that the Supreme Court will have the jurisdiction for a review of the decision. The amendment, however, did not alter the federal character of the state in any fundamental way, despite having introduced a new shape of local government system. However, the election of the president for the next term became a political controversy. 18th Amendment to the Constitution of 1973. The 18th Amendment Act was a watershed movement in the history of Pakistan's constitutional development. In a joint sitting of Parliament on the 20th September 2008, President Asif Ali Zardari issued a call for the creation of an all-parties committee to revisit the 17th Amendment and Article 58(2)(b). 27-member Parliamentary Committee on constitutional reforms was set up with the task to propose amendments to the Constitution, keeping in view the 17th Amendment, Charter of Democracy and provincial autonomy in order to meet the democratic and Islamic aspirations of the people of Pakistan. The committee prioritized reforms which would improve transparency in the political system, minimize individual discretion, strengthen parliament and provincial assemblies, increase provincial autonomy, ensure the independence of the judiciary, strengthen fundamental rights and promote good governance. The committee met 77 times, revisited all 280 articles of the Constitution, and its deliberations culminated in the Constitution 18th Amendment Act 2010, which received the presidential assent on the 19th April 2010. In all, 102 articles of the Constitution were amended, inserted, added, substituted or deleted, making it an unprecedented overhaul of the Constitution. It was a landmark achievement in Pakistan, not simply for its sweeping constitutional reforms, but also for the cooperation it had garnered across the political spectrum to move Pakistan towards a federal parliamentary system of government. After 18th Amendment, all the major items in the concurrent list were transferred to the provinces. This made them more autonomous and in a better position to deal with the local issues. Almost 17 ministries were transferred from federation to province. The important subjects transferred to provinces include civil laws, curriculum and policies for education, environmental control, labor laws, population planning and social welfare, zakat and awqaf, drugs and medicine, arms and ammunition. This devolution of power is unique in country's history and has moved the federal principle of country from a strong center to participatory federalism. Some other amendments related to the federalism in 18th Amendment are empowerment of Senate. Senate is empowered by the 18th Amendment by equating it with the National Assembly in terms of exercise of powers and functions. National Economic Council made effective by changes to the Article 156 to make National Economic Council more effective, specified the members of National Economic Council to be Prime Minister as chairman, 4 chief ministers with member from each province and 4 members to be nominated by the Prime Minister. It is now compulsory for National Economic Council to meet twice a year. National Economic Council is required to submit annual report to each house of the parliament. Changes in National Finance Commission. 2 new provisions have been added to Article 160 to ensure provincial autonomy in the distribution of revenue by the National Finance Commission. These provisions are 3A. This clause states that the share of provinces cannot be decreased and it shall not be less than the share in previous awards made by the National Finance Commission. 3B. This clause directs the finance ministers of provinces and federation to submit the reports biannually before both houses of parliament and provincial assemblies. Debates and controversies. The 18th Amendment altered about a third of Pakistan's constitution, and while it may have found parliamentary support at the time of its drafting, it is not difficult to expect that such a drastic overhaul would prove controversial. Indeed, few state or political institutions remain undisturbed from its influence, and the reforms the amendment laid down have often been challenged. In removing Article 58 2b and reforming electoral institutions, for instance, the 18th Amendment tried even to limit the political manipulation of Pakistan's most powerful state institution, the armed force. The most enduring contention concerning the amendment, however, has been on the issue of devolution. Did the 18th Amendment devolve too much power and resources away from the center? This question has arisen over the country's current response to the pandemic, its need to execute projects related to the lucrative China-Pakistan economic corridor, and steer away from the precipice of economic collapse. Whether the provinces were prepared for the expansion of administrative responsibilities, or whether devolution has delivered on its promise of producing better governance, are concerns which dovetail current debates on the 18th Amendment. Another issue is that the devolution of power and resources from provincial governments to local governments, as stipulated by the insertion of Article 140A, remains unfulfilled. This has become a point of contention, especially recently, as local governments struggle to respond to the devastating floods which have swept Karachi. Neither the incentive nor the willingness to carry out this further step of devolution appears to be present, leading to a crisis in governance at the local level and mounting calls for military intervention in Sindh. The debate over the 18th Amendment highlights the divide between the proponents of a strong center and those of the federal system. The fear of landmark amendment being completely rolled back or watered down may be exaggerated, but it is not without some basis. There is a growing view in the military establishment and among some political groups that the amendment has weakened the state and has been a major reason for the country's financial problems. The debate has become politically more intense since the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government came to power. The PPP and other opposition parties smell a conspiracy to bring back a unitary system, curbing the autonomy of the federating units. There is even talk about the imposition of a presidential system. The general feeling in the Pakistani military establishment is that 18th Amendment has become a major cause of unbalance between federation and provinces. The provinces do not have the means to deal with the law and order situation. Pakistan security apparatus see 18th Amendment Act more dangerous than the 6 points of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The perception is that the amendment has changed Pakistan from a federation to confederation. While concluding, though the Pakistani Federation fulfills minimum criteria of federalism, but it operates more likely as a unitary system. It is commonly believed that if a federal system operates in practice as a unitary system, it loses its capacity to accommodate ethnic and territorial cleavages. However, the 18th Amendment has therefore been an important step forward in center-province relations in Pakistan and in relations between provinces. A stronger provinces may also lead a stronger federation. Recognition of provincial rights, whether or not they are associated with a particular group, can strengthen affinity with the federation. Recognition of diversity can also be a source of strength. Although Pakistan's federation has become more inclusive, however, there remains a long way to go. With this, dear students, I conclude today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.